So I'm assuming that everyone here has gone to public or private school their entire life. But that's not the case for many kids our age. A lot of them were homeschooled. Now, since, again, I'm assuming that all of you went to public or private school, your siblings most likely have too. Now, the estimated school year for 2015 to 2016, there's over 100,000 students that will be homeschooled instead of going to public or private school. Now, homeschooling has fixed a lot of aspects that public schools take away from children, like if they're bullied, homeschooling is always the answer to most parents. And I understand that, and I don't want to take away from what other parents think, because I'm not a parent, so I can't really speak on behalf of your child. But to me, being homeschooled would take away the social interaction aspect of school, not to mention the growth and development that your child will go through at a public school with other students their age and teachers who are going to be teaching them different things, because you're going to teach them what you think that they should know when the teachers are going to teach them what they actually should know. An example is from a middleschool.net, which is an online kind of place written for teachers, by teachers, and a quote from there is, "Forming bonds and socializing with children their own age is important for a child's developmental health and developmental social skills," which I completely agree with, because when you're at school, you get the chance to talk to kids your age, you get to make friends, you get to understand what's going on around you, and it helps you grow. Anyone here can say that they've either lost a friend or gained a friend that has helped them through something very important to themselves. To me, I have a very small group of friends. I'm kind to everyone, and everyone's kind to me, yes, but I only have a small group of friends that I will tell everything and anything to, because they're the ones that I grew up with. I've had my best friend since I was in kindergarten, and she is still my best friend. We go to the same school. Today she's bringing me in Arizona. So we're like this. It's true. But she was helping me with this project, and she told me how she has a friend who's homeschooled. I don't know anyone who was homeschooled. She has a friend from her church youth group, and she says that she is very outgoing, so she doesn't agree with me that homeschooling takes away the social aspect, which is why I stated at the beginning that homeschooling has fixed most of its problems with the social aspect. They take their kids to museums, or like her friend is in a youth group, which I think is what helped her become a social person. But being homeschooled had nothing to do with her youth group. Being homeschooled probably kept her away from most kids her age, unless she had neighbors or siblings that were close to her. But regardless, she didn't get a chance to be thrown in like the rest of us and had to meet a bunch of new people, like in kindergarten, when all of a sudden you're new to school and you already made 3 friends. My cousin started school this year, and he's his first year of elementary. He's in kindergarten right now. I went with him on his first day because I had the day off of school, and by the end of the time that I left him, he had 3 friends. A little girl had a different best friend than when she started, and he was blossoming like crazy. Like, he already had, like I said, 3 friends. His friends had friends, so like they were all talking in a group. He was the leader for like 3 different lines. I was like amazed that he was already out there. And I think it has something to do with the fact that we have a lot of cousins in my family, and he's the youngest boy, so we try to like get him to talk to people, get him to talk to, granted we're with him the whole time because we don't want him with any strangers, but we do get him to talk to people, and he blossomed being in a school with a bunch of other kids rather than being stuck at home with his little sister and my other younger cousin. So I was very happy with the way that turned out. In a different online article, it stated that as a homeschool would just have children from either one or two families, there is not much of a scope of a social interaction, which I agree with again. If you have just one child and you decide to take on the responsibility of becoming a homeschool teacher, it takes a lot out of you. There was like 6 different things that it takes from you, which is time, money, patience, I can't remember the rest of them, but it was motivation and something that wasn't like as big, but like the main one was the socializing, and that was like the biggest little part of that section that I read online. And I agreed with it because if you only have one child and you decide to take on that responsibility, they're losing their social aspect. They only talk to you for like 5 hours a day. It's not bad that you're that close to your child, but they need to be with children their own age. Now, in conclusion, homeschooling works, and I'm not taking away from it. It does or doesn't. It is a good necessity that certain students need. But homeschooling takes away from socializing for your child. They will have a harder time making friends. They will have a harder time in a workplace when they're older. And I don't think it's worth it. So in the future, when you're all paying those tax dollars, it's going towards schools for teachers to teach your children. Send them to school. That way they're better in the future and they get a chance to really connect with people. And there's a chance that I might be their teacher. Thank you.
Oh, good timing, Steve. You can tell us all about the speech we just heard.
That was a great speech.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a little awkward, isn't it? Timing's bad. Let me see if there's somebody. He's not here. That doesn't help us. Maybe we can just do a quick switch here. Moises, maybe could you give us a few words on that speech, and then Steve can switch and do the speaker that you were going to do.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I thought overall it was a pretty good speech. Most of my deal with your speech has to do with the way you spoke it. I mean, your sources were good for the most part. You could also cite the articles you read online more. You just said the article I read. You could explain where it's from or why it's credible. Your voice could be a little bit more projective. You can be excited about this. I mean, it sounds like something you're very passionate about. At the end, you also ended that you wanted to be a teacher. So I would imagine it's something that's very important to you. So, you know, could be a little bit more, I would say a little bit more emotional about the topic. Yeah. Other than that, it was a pretty good speech.
Okay. Thank you. kind of warm up a little bit more. Sorry. I like the opening statement. I think you're a little inconsistent in the way you express yourself, though, as you're making the transition to the point that you're trying to make in the speech. The number about 100,000 students, I don't know if that's nationwide or in the state of California. It sounds like to me it's in California, because that number seems low for it being nationwide. You ought to give us a source citation on that. And I thought that what Moises said also is true, that we're getting a lot of, a place I went to, middleschool.org or whatever it was. I don't know what that is. I mean, I have no idea if it's a middle school, if it's a group that's devoted to teachers who work at middle schools, and I don't know who said it on those particular sites, and so the information's a little bit incomplete. Sometimes you're quoting folks there, and we don't, it's an opinion, but we don't know whose opinion it is and how well informed it is and what it's based on. And there are only 2 or 3 of those spots in your speech where you're using that kind of information. You tend to rely on examples and personal experience. Now, your own experience, I think, is good at showing why there's a value to having people going to a public school or even a private school where they're interacting with other students. I think that gives a good explanation as to what's going on, from your perspective, but it doesn't necessarily address the what you see as being a negative from the other perspective. And in fact, you have an example of your friend who knows somebody from their youth group who is a homeschooled person, and they say that person doesn't have any particular problems. And so now you're trying to have to rely on the only example that you know of is one that runs contrary to your position, and you've got these kind of vague statements about it. And even the one statement that you attributed to somebody on one of the websites is, talks about how it's important to form these relationships. It doesn't say that you can't form these relationships in the homeschool environment. So I think you need to have a little bit more data there. You're operating on a lot of presuppositions without a lot of other information to substantiate it. I was listening to you say, at one point you said, well, if you don't have a lot of friends or you're relying on the example of your friend, and you mentioned that, I can't remember the exact phrasing of it, but there was a place where I wrote down, why are neighbors, siblings, and youth groups inadequate substitutes for meeting people at school? Because it seemed like that was the criticism that you were making, is that they're not going to meet people at school unless they have friends, siblings, or are a member of a youth group. And I'm going, well, don't they? Why wouldn't they have those kinds of things? Why would those be inadequate? I think there's an argument to be made for encountering a diversity of people and having to work through some complicated relationships. But you don't give us any of those examples. You don't give us any reason why that's important. There's not any authoritative testimony on this. And so, I think you present an interesting idea, but it's not one that is as convincing as it ought to be. You've got a claim of fact here that you're presenting, that kids who are homeschooled are going to miss out on something, and I need to see some evidence of what it is they're missing out on. You mentioned, for instance, bullying. Well, there's one thing that kids miss out on. I'm not exactly sure that people are missing on anything on that, but I think there's an argument to be made that says, yeah, there is. Kids need to learn to handle themselves. They need to deal with people that aren't always friendly and like them and become their pals. They got to deal with the crappy people too, and they're not going to get those opportunities, not going to learn how to do that. I don't know if there's any data on this. That may be one of the reasons that this is a little bit problematic. All right. The presentation I thought was very nice. You did a very good job speaking to us, and all of your examples, when you talk about them, like we said about the other speech, it's you seem sympathetic and you're energetic and you have a perspective that you're communicating effectively to the audience, and that's definitely where we want you to be at this point when it comes to your speaking skills. So you're doing a good job there. All right, thank you.